it's those personal stories that stay with you. Like, I've interviewed politicians, I've interviewed celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Sting, people like that. But they're really well rehearsed. They know what to say. For me, it's it's the women who have been through so much and still get up and they want to share their stories to help other people. And they're the stories that I could recount to you because I remember them. And that's why sharing your story can have such an impact.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Happy Investor Podcast with me, Sophie. And today I'm joined by my wonderful friend, Carol Driver. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I just feel like everything's a whirlwind. And as I just said to you, I have sprayed myself with perfume for this podcast recording, just getting ready on autopilot.
I love it. I love it. You're in the vibe. You're getting the atmosphere right and you're feeling it. So you're going to tell us all about how to become famous. Because you specialize in PR. Do you think it's true that you don't have to be the best at what you do? You just have to be the best known?
Yeah, and I don't even, what does the best at what you do actually mean? I don't know, what's the hierarchy? And that all depends on industry and everything else. So I don't really believe that you can be the best, you can be the most well-known in your industry. So yeah, it's that you need to be the most well-known and also have credibility behind you as well.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you all about PR and how we can get more of it and really build our businesses with the power of PR. I want to talk to you about India because you just did an epic adventure. And I love an adventure. Where should we start? Let's start with you and your background if you want to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hello, listeners. So I am Carol Driver. I'm going to be 50 this year. And each year I say I've been a journalist for X amount of years. I forget to add on the other year. So for a while, I'd been a journalist for about 25 years, but I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years now. And I worked at local newspapers. I was made editor of a group of regional publications when I was about 25. And then I went on to work my way up to the national. So I've worked on news desks, international news desks, showbiz desks, lifestyle desks. And then my last position, I was the female editor at MailOnline, where along with an incredible team, we took the channel from 2.5 million hits a day to up to 15.5 million hits a day by working out the strategy of what people read, how they read it, when they read it, everything like that. And also because it's relevant, I launched along with two other editors, the editorial division for the commercial team. So we were working with global brands coming up with what were called native story ideas. So these were written by journalists, led by journalists, but were promoting brands. Obviously, legally they still had to be called sponsored, but it was very much led by the journalists. So it was me being able to use my journalistic skills to come up with ideas for brands. And that then led me on when I left MailOnline when my daughter was 2 to start my own PR business. But I do say I'm not a PR, I'm a journalist. So I approach things sort of differently.
That's amazing. So what do you love about journalism?
God, the thing that so I had a lot of jobs before getting into journalism. I started, first part-time job when I was about 14. By the time I'd left university, I'd had about 50 jobs, like temping work, trying things, lots of sales positions. I'd just tried everything, but nothing kind of captured my imagination. Nothing captured my attention. And then I'd always loved story writing. I remember as a punishment at primary school, I was given, I had to go home and write a story. It was about a cat in green boots because I remember it well, even though I was 9. And I wrote pages and pages of about 15 chapters. So that was always my thing. When I was at school, it was you were either good at maths, good at English, and I was good at English. And then when I left my A-levels, I took a year out and then came back and I thought I want to go to university, and I flipped through and I saw journalism and I was like, yeah, it was kind of like a light bulb moment. So I went and studied that. The thing that I love, so when I started many moons ago, we had a fax machine. We had one computer with this thing called email that will never take off. And we were, very much at that stage. And what I've seen is a complete evolution of newsrooms, journalism, how we report the news, everything has just changed. So from that aspect, it's always changing. But also, what I really love is talking to people. I'm probably not very good at small talk, though. I actually like having real conversations with people. I've liked to find out their stories. I like to find out why they do what they do. And that's ultimately what I really love. And I also know that I'm a trusted pair of hands. So when I speak to somebody about their story, and I've helped hundreds of women share really, really personal stories, I know that I'm going to do that justice for them. And that means a lot to me as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all those things.
That's amazing. You must have heard some incredible stories throughout your career.
Yep, I've heard heartbreaking stories. Absolutely, I've had people tell me things and I've had to put them on mute on my phone because I am just heartbroken. I'm actually crying.
Mm.
Which, as a journalist, you're supposed to be hardened to it. But some things, it's those personal stories that stay with you. Like, I've interviewed politicians, I've interviewed celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Sting, people like that. But they're really well rehearsed. They know what to say. For me, it's it's the women who have been through so much and still get up and they want to share their stories to help other people. And they're the stories that I could recount to you because I remember them.
Mm.
And that's why sharing your story can have such an impact.
Yeah, amazing. So, in terms of PR for our businesses, why is it so important and how do you even get started?
Yeah. So,
And
okay.
what should we talk about? Is it our business? Is it us? How do we sort of leverage it to grow our business?
Okay, let me go back to your first question. I'm perimenopausal, so I'll try to remember all the questions. So why is it important? For so many reasons. So PR is basically everything you do in your business that is forward facing. Okay, so it's the way that you show up to events. It's the way that you show up on social media. It's the way that you talk to people. It's the way that you deal with your clients. It's absolutely everything. PR is also being featured by newspapers, being featured by magazines, online, TV, radio, podcasts, anything that is forward facing. Why is that important? Because as a business, you won't grow unless you're visible. If people cannot find you, then they're not going to buy from you. They're not going to be in your world. So it's super important because all of these different platforms have different elements of credibility and different reaches. So if you think of your Facebook page, or a Facebook group, you will go on there and you will say to people, I've done all this and this is great and this is why I can help you. And there are lots of people saying that right now. Okay, so that's one thing. That's your platform. It has a certain reach. To be featured by a newspaper or a magazine and to have a journalist verify that, yeah, you have done those things and you are who you say you are, it's that third party seal of approval. And then you get to say that on your website. Yeah, I'm telling you the truth. This is who I am and it's been verified. So there's the things that you shout about, but once you have that, yeah, I am this person, you've only got to go to two similar coaches or brands or businesses. Look at their websites. If one has got all the trust stamps on there, been featured by this publication, this web, they've got them there, and one that hasn't, but is saying, yeah, I could make you rich or I can do this for
Yes.
you. Who are you going to believe?
Mhm.
There's statistics and studies and facts to prove that we will automatically go to the one that is telling us actually somebody else has verified what we do. That's also why testimonials are so important because it's somebody else saying, yeah, I've done that and that is correct. That's what I experience. So they're just some of the reasons why PR is so important. Just to add to that, we're seeing, AI is in our lives now, right? Chat, Claude, all of these platforms where we consume information. If you don't have an online presence in newspapers or magazines or domains that have a high value of trust attached to them, like local press, these publications have been going for decades and decades, and they are considered by chat and AI and those platforms to be trustworthy.
Right.
So we're now using those platforms to search more and more, give me 10 property investors in, this area, and what that does is skim across all these trustworthy sites and bring back the most trustworthy people. So if you don't have a presence online in local press, in national press or magazines, that's going to come back and say, I can't find anything on this person. And that's where we are now. That's only going to be amplified in 5 years. So you do need to be thinking about that now.
Okay.
So in terms of which stories do you share, that really depends on you and your business. So we've kind of covered a little bit about personal stories. Personal stories are the ones that have an impact. They resonate with people. Years ago, we'd sit around a campfire and tell stories. Newspapers were started because of gossip and we wanted to know what was going on. Those personal stories are the ones that we remember. So, if you're sharing something, whether it's a health situation that you've been through, whether it's a personal or a funny, anything that draws in people into your world who are then going to be able to relate to you much more. Once people trust you, they're much more likely to work with you. So the personal story has a huge amount of power. And I had this chat with somebody the other day. They were like, I don't really have that huge, from, for example, I was homeless to this and now I'm this and now I'm this. And it doesn't need to always be so dramatic. It doesn't need to be that really extreme beginning and ending. That depends on the publication that you're going to appeal to. What Good Housekeeping wants is very different to what The Sun wants. They're still really valuable platforms. And that's another way to consider these publications is as platforms that have huge amounts of reach. So rather than thinking them of titles, think of their demographics.
Yeah.
And do you want to reach that demographic? So the personal story is hugely, hugely valuable. Expert-led stories are so important as well, because as a journalist, it's not my job to know everything. It's my job to know what readership is going to appeal or what topics are going to appeal to a readership or an editor. And it's your job as the expert for me to come to you and say, well, look, I'm running this story. What can you tell me about it? And that builds up your profile as the go-to in your field. Once you start talking about what you know, start in those discussions. So you've got personal stories, you've got expert-led stories, they're everywhere. I'm a such and such profession. Here are 5 things that you didn't know, or here are 5 ways to. And the reason why we see so many of those is that they do so well, which gives us an indication that readers want to read them. If you see things coming up time and again, especially on online websites, online newspapers, it's because they're doing well. Newspapers that are online only want things that are going to bring them in traffic. So, and then your last question, Sophie, what was your last question?
How do we start?
How do we start? Thank you. So, starting is really important. It's never too early to start thinking about PR, whether or not I'm not saying go out tomorrow and phone a journalist, because that's not the right way to do it. But you do need to start thinking about it as soon as you are thinking about starting your business. I've worked with brands, and so as well as running my own PR agency, I get bolted on by bigger agencies to service their clients as well, because I'm known for getting good results. I remember one client in particular who had an incredibly successful subscription box. He started this in his kitchen with his mum, packing it.
Yeah.
And we were like, great, have you got the photos? No.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great story.
It's such a
Get
shame.
in the kitchen and take a picture.
I know. Come on, just reenact that. So always take photos. Always keep, just a kind of document of challenges or of thoughts that you're having, even if it's not for now, but you just take, 20 minutes every month just to add things to that folder, because that will be PR gold once you are, ready to start with PR. I've known stories, I've pitched stories to editors and they're like, yeah, this is amazing. Do they have photos of this? No. Then we won't run it. And that is, that's so frustrating, because you just think, we've got so far, we've got, we're there, but we don't have the collateral to back it up. So photos, videos, anything visual is key. So start thinking about PR. But also remember that even when you start your business, everything that you do that's forward facing is PR. So you're already doing it.
Yeah.
You just don't realize perhaps that that is a form of PR. When you do want to start reaching out to newspapers, magazines, look, there are DIY courses that you can go and do. There are pitching groups that you can go and join.
What's
I
a
always
pitching group?
there are groups on Facebook that you can join as an entrepreneur, and journalists come in and they say, I'm looking for this for a case study. I'm looking for this person. And you can put yourself forwards for that. So that's great if you know what you're doing. Okay. Otherwise, and this is something that I keep talking about at the moment, is not to give your story away for free. This is what you have to treat as marketing. Okay, this is your business and this is your part of your marketing strategy. So your stories, where you're going to use them, how you want them to kind of land, and what the momentum is that you're going to build. It's pretty easy if you know what you're doing and you've got a decent pitch. It's pretty easy to get one piece of publicity. Okay, phone a journalist, tell them your story, you'll get a piece of publicity. It's much harder and therefore much more valuable if you are building momentum, because that's where the credibility comes from. That's where you're really elevating yourself in your industry, because this is earned media. It's not advertorial. You're not buying it. This is somebody else saying your opinions are worth listening to. Your expertise is worth. And we know, because we've got hundreds of thousands of readers, and we know they want to know what you know. And with my clients, I'm just thinking of one client in particular who's a pharmacist. It got to the point where editors at top publications were phoning me saying, can she comment on this? Can she write this piece for us? It's a really quick turnaround. At one point, she was the splash. So the front page story on a national website.
Wow.
And you actually cannot buy that type of PR. You can't buy that placement. So this is all earned on her knowledge. So you start by really thinking about your strategy. That is vital, because without it, you're just giving away all your collateral. And then it's much, much harder to kind of pick it back up again. You know, I worked with a client a few years ago and they came to me saying, yeah, Carol, really want to work with you. I was like, great. They were like, yeah, we gave our story away last year to the Sun. And I was like, okay, has anything changed since then? They were like, well, no, not really. I was like, okay, can you talk about this? Well, no. Okay. And I did a bit for them and I came back and I said, look, I'm just banging my head against a brick wall, which I don't want to do. I don't want to waste your money. I don't want to waste my time. And we just sort of called it a day. And it was such a shame, because they were brilliant. And had they thought the other way round, that they could then launch with this personal story in the press and then build on it, it would have meant that they would have been hugely, it would have just gone upwards from there. And PR done right can lead to brilliant results. So I've known people to get book deals, speaking opportunities, regular This Morning appearances, agents, columnists. One woman who I worked with, who is on Instagram as Money Mum. I found her when she had about 70,000 followers on Instagram. She shares tips and advice on how mums can budget. Got her a double page spread in the Sun. And from there, it just went bonkers. 2-book deal. She's got up to 500,000 followers now.
No.
You know, one of the things on her wish list when I spoke to her was to have Stacey Solomon follow her on Instagram. Well, now she goes away with Stacey Solomon.
Wow.
You know,
so how did you get that for her then? What did you pitch a certain way? Like, how did you?
I spoke to her.
Yeah.
And I guess this is where I'm slightly different, because I'm a journalist. I'm looking for that story. I'm looking, I kind of think in headlines. So I'll talk to somebody and I'm like, right, okay, that's that part of the headline. That's that part of the headline. And it turned out that she had paid off her mortgage by the age of 40, despite never earning more than 25 grand a year.
Wow.
And she had all these techniques in place, all these
Mm.
tips. And of course, who doesn't want to know that?
Yeah.
We were entering the cost of living crisis. So
Mm.
it was like a perfect storm. So I pitched it for what it was. That was her story, but I'm able to dig out that story because I know what I'm looking for. And I've seen that time and again. Not everything is that perfect storm. It's not going to be that on one piece of coverage suddenly it's life changing. And for the majority of people, that does not happen. For the majority of my clients, so for example, my decluttering clients, they came on board with me for a 5-month book launch project. They had a new Bloomsbury book out. And then 18 months later, they were still with me because the results just kept happening. And we went from, so I pitched them to the Times and they never came back. They were in the press. All my clients are in the national press every month without fail. I secured them a regular column. They were in so many publications. And it got to the stage a year later where that Times journalist had seen all this going on, came back to me, also secured them a 1-hour special on Women's Hour. They were they were everywhere. The Times journalist then came back to me and said, can I interview them now? They had a full page in the Sunday Times specifically about them. So that's kind of the escalation that you want. You don't just want to have a blip and then fade away because that's pointless. Another thing, just to mention as well, don't just put yourself forward for journalist requests because, and this happens, and I put a post out, I actually shared this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and I had 55,000 views, which is a lot for me. I don't normally get that many. But I said, don't do this because editors will blacklist you. So if you're the type of person you just constantly put yourself forward for any kind of case study request, it gets to a point where an editor says, well, I've seen you a lot of times, so we're not going to feature you. So you kind of shoot yourself in the foot for thinking that putting yourself forward for anything is a good strategy. It's not. It all has to be aligned and meaningful and bringing people back into your world.
Yeah. Amazing. This is all gold. So in terms of a PR strategy then, you said you're getting your clients in the press every single month.
Yeah.
Are you every month thinking, right, we haven't done this publication yet, I'm going to pitch it to them? Do you tweak it each time? Is it the same story but pitched slightly differently for different publications? Or are you like, right, do something new because we need a new angle on this?
So it's all of those things and lots more as well. So I will map out the strategy for each of my clients in terms of which publications are relevant to them, the angles that we can go. And this is another thing about doing it yourself is that unless you know how to do it right, you might give away 3 or 4 stories to one journalist thinking it's all one story. So I'll interview my client and I'll think, right, that's one story, that's another story, that's another story. That can go in that publication and that publication. There are also publications who will run stories after certain publications, and there are publications who won't run a story if it's been in a specific publication.
Right.
So there's all these kind of nuances as well that you need to be aware of, because you have to work out which publication is best for you and your message, and then work around that. So it's all of those things. But I will I'm constantly think of ideas for my clients. I'll read the press in the morning. I'll think, right, they could comment on that. This could be a spin-off of that. That could be that. And I'm doing that at the same time as thinking about their strategy. So making sure that it all ties in with what they want.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot. This
It's
is
a lot
why
of moving parts.
this is why I'm like, you can do your own PR, but actually you really need to know what you're doing, because this is why big agencies can charge 50 grand retainers a month. It's not just, but if it was just that, they wouldn't be able to charge that. But there's so much more to it.
Yeah. You put a strategy in place and it just snowballs people's visibility. And you said about, you don't want to just give your story away for free to this publication or whatever. Do people pay people for stories and to be featured?
Yeah. So I don't mean in terms of money. What I mean is that has a value to you. And if you give that away without thinking, how best is this going to come back to me? You know, how do I want this to serve me? What am I going to ask for in the
Mm.
article? Am I going to ask for a link to my website, a link to my new book? How's it going to promote you? Because if you just give it away without any of that knowledge, that's gone. You can't
Yes.
then revisit that story
Yeah.
and come back without a really significant update. So yeah, in terms of monetary amounts, sadly, I think those days are long gone. So it was speaking to one of my clients, and she did a lot of press quite a while ago, and she got paid by the Sun £25,000 to do a double page spread with
Whoa.
them. It used to be really big money, but now because there are so many channels, there's so many people wanting to share their stories, um, that kind of payment isn't there anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. So you need to be really strategic on what you're going to ask for. And are people ever worried about being written up badly or not getting across right?
Yeah,
How
of
do you
course.
deal with that?
Yeah. So obviously, when I'm doing somebody's PR, then I've dealt with crisis comms before. I've managed all that kind of strategy. And it can happen. I'm not going to sit here and say, because what you're doing is asking a third party to kind of check you out. And they're going to check you out, but they're not going to write an advert. If you want to place an advert, I think you can place an advertorial on a top newspaper for about £50,000.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you want to pay that, then
Yeah.
you can. Then you get to say exactly what you want to say. But if you're asking somebody else, they're going to be thinking, I want to make sure my readers can trust this person. And that doesn't necessarily mean doing an all singing, all dancing article on them. And I think it's misleading to say that's what you want. I've just had a review for one client's product, and the review is a 4-star review, loads of positives, but she said she didn't like the look of the product. And great, that's earned media, that's somebody's opinion.
Mhm.
And I think we can't condition ourselves to think that everything needs to be,
Mm.
this wholly positive, because that feels um, a little bit fake as well. Nothing is
Mm.
perfect. People will have different ideas. So the journalist's job is to report on something, to make sure that everything adds up. And, if they've reviewed your service or your product or interviewed you, then it may well have some things that you think, oh, I'm uncomfortable with that. So I spoke to another entrepreneur. I won't name her, but she came and found me and she said, oh, just gone live in the Metro and they've put this headline on it. And I was like, okay, but do you want people to read that story? Let the journalists do their job. They're going to write a headline that they know their readers are going to click on.
Yes. Yeah.
If you don't want them to read it, then what
Yeah.
you want to do PR, but really limit that publicity. Own that, because you are saying that. They've just summarized that in a way that maybe makes you feel uncomfortable. But we're not placing adverts. We're placing content that draws the right people into your world, that sparks discussion. If you are that person who's able to do that, then great. If you don't want to do that, don't do opinion pieces.
Mm. Yes.
Make sure that you are bringing in a strategy that's relevant to you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. This is all very, very useful. And let's talk about the PR you did recently, because we were at an event in Leeds with over 300 people there, and you sponsored the lanyards that every single person was wearing them. And it wasn't like you're a small name somewhere. Your name was all over it. And then we all had a massive, big label with our name. And mine literally said, Carol Driver, Sophie Foot. And you were absolutely everywhere. That was genius.
I know. And honestly, I'd like to take credit for it, but I had no idea. I just saw that Matt had put out a post saying, would anyone like to sponsor the lanyards? And I thought, yeah, like, I really like to do things a little bit differently. I once sponsored the posters in the loos at
Mhm.
somebody else's event, because I
Yeah.
was like, do you know what? I just like to think a little bit outside the box. So I saw Matt's post and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I didn't know what it entailed. I just thought that feels a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I went ahead, and then I was in the queue and so many people were like, oh, that's not my lanyard. Oh, no, hold on, that is my lanyard, because they were reading my name thinking it was mine. Um, and yeah, I couldn't, I'm just in everyone's photos. It's Carol
Yeah.
Driver PR in everybody's photos, which I didn't even think that far
Mm.
ahead. So it was, and then one of the speakers, I can't remember her name. She was on the panel talking about AI. I was in the lift with her, and she said she sponsors the lanyard at every single event she attends.
Oh.
She said it is genius. She says she's had so much visibility based on that. And I thought, God, I hadn't even
Mm.
really thought about that. But yeah, it was such a good investment.
Yeah. And you said you've now been asked to do it again.
Yeah, so off the back of that, the guys who run Atomicon, they were there, and they were on a table with somebody who I know, and she kindly said, they said that she said I was great at what I do. So they reached out to me and said, would you like to sponsor the lanyards at our event, which I think they've got about 1,500 people going. So I was like, yeah, that feels like a good next step. So, and this is the thing with PR as well. We always think that we want to reach our ideal client. Through being in newspapers and magazines, you're not only reaching your ideal client, you might be reaching TV producers, book publishers,
Mm.
podcast. There's so many people who are reading different publications to get ideas for their clients or for their publication or for their podcast. So
Mm.
never think that it's just specifically about reaching your ideal client. Because, off the back of that, okay, I've paid to sponsor it. So, it's a win for them, hopefully. But it brings me into a different world that I hadn't thought
Yeah.
would be kind of available to me, because I'm not one of these huge businesses that would go and spend, 35 grand on sponsoring something for one
Yeah.
event. So it works well for me as well.
Mm. Amazing. What other creative PR could we be doing or that you've seen that has worked really well?
Yeah. So I'll talk about India because you mentioned that then, and
Yes,
I'll weave that
please.
into that. So
Yeah.
India was incredible. So there were 30 entrepreneurs, and I think it's 35 entrepreneurs who drove tuk-tuks from Chennai to Goa. So we did more than 1,000 miles in these tin cans that have lawnmower engines, and oh my God, you're like filthy. There's no makeup. One person on our tuk-tuk got unwell, so I was feeding her Diarrhea at like
Oh,
midnight while she was on the
no.
floor. She was fine the next day. But it was really amazing for so many reasons, because you're thrown into a situation you would never be in, really, with complete strangers. And then you're just in each other's worlds, because you bypass all those levels of like
Yeah.
small talk and it's just like, oh my God, we're going to crash, or we've broken down, or what are we going to do about this? So that's a great way of being part of something. I generated PR for that. Loads of other people generated PR for that. I'm going to write about that for Top Sunday magazine. I was interviewed on BBC Radio. The reason why that's good, bringing it back to a level of PR, is it gives you something to talk about.
Mm.
And really, if you're bringing a journalist something new that they haven't heard before, that's gold to them. That's what they
Yeah.
really, really want. They want exclusive stories. They want things that spark conversations. They want extreme things. So as much as you can think about that, for my PR clients, I don't really do stunts or anything like that. But if there are things that they've done that are different to, how often do you hear about people driving across India in tuk-tuks?
Mm.
I'd only heard of it once before, and then I signed up. So
Mm.
if there's anything else like that you feel, they could make good stories. It could be a way to get in contact with your local press, your local radio station, and become more on their radar, because you're going to give them things that they really want.
Yeah. Amazing. Brilliant. Let's all sign up for that. And what was it for? Was it for a charity?
Yes, so it was for a charity based in Chennai, which helps schools. So it helps build more classrooms for schools, get more kids into education, and it also helps with healthcare for women as well. So all the entrepreneurs all covered their own costs, and all the sponsorship money just went direct to the charity as well.
That's amazing.
I think we've raised at this stage, I'm sure it's more than 40,000. We're just waiting to get the figure. Yeah. And I was really pleased. So many people sponsored me. So thank you if any of them are listening to this,
Yeah.
because it was brilliant.
And what were your highlights of that trip?
Oh my gosh, so many highlights. Oh, I can't even pinpoint a few highlights. Meeting people across, who have very different life experiences, but who, we're all the same. We're all the same. We're all people. We're all, you know, they're, it's the geography that's different. Okay. And you're meeting people who, I don't really know if this is a highlight, but it was a realization moment for me. Pulling up and talking to a couple at the side of the road, and they're selling like giant teddy bears, and they've got 2 kids, and the police pulled up, and because they shouldn't be selling there, they were fined 10,000 rupees, and they just didn't have it. And she was just in tears. And I remember just thinking, this could be anybody. This could be any of us. And I just gave her a hug, and it was a really kind of, a realization that this is all a bit bonkers sometimes, and there are people who are just born into such an unfair system. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways in terms of, my highlights. We were such a novelty to people who saw us. We had motorbikes pulling alongside us, wanting to take selfies. We pulled up a petrol station. They brought out a massive speaker, and we were all dancing on the forecourt and videoing it. We'd stop and gift things to children, and we'd go into local stores, and we bought saris and food and drink, and just being immersed in a world that isn't your own, and just looking at all the beauty, but also all the poverty as well. And it's just a real kind of eye opener, and it makes you think. It does kind of give you a bit of a shift to kind of realize that we can all do a bit more, and we can, the things that we think we're scared of doing because there's a voice in our head telling us, don't do that, that's going to lead to X, Y, Z. It doesn't really matter. And if you're in a position to grow your business and help more people, go and grow your business and help more people.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. And you should get that all over the press because it's a brilliant adventure.
It was. Yeah, it was really good. Are you going to do it next year,
Thank
Sophie?
you so much. So what are you working on at the moment? What are you excited for this year?
So this year, my shift has been, last year, my business just went bonkers. I was filled up with done for you clients. And whilst that was great, and I'm grateful, I did not leave my desk.
Yeah.
And I thought there's no room to do anything. I was cancelling things I'd booked, cancelling retreats I'd spent thousands of pounds on. And I also lost my dad last year, and it kind of shifted. That's the reason I signed up for India. And for this year, it's my mission to help more people who aren't at a stage to work one-to-one with me. And so I've launched the Consistency Club, and this is mapping out people's strategy. I'm going to talk to you, I'm blue in the face about this because it's so important. Yeah. And when you're on the other side and you can kind of see the mistakes people are making, I'm really like, I can help you. I can help you with that PR so you can go away and do those things, but that you understand why you're doing it and build out your strategy. I'm also launching some really just small events, getting entrepreneurs, I'm pointing that way because it's going to be in my garden, entrepreneurs in front of editors, but really good editors, really good journalists who are going to give them real kind of insights, because PR is something every business will need to have at some stage. So it's really important that you do it right. And I really want to help people with that.
So tell us more about the Consistency Club, because I bet there are people listening going, just help me, Carol.
I know. And I really want to. So this took years for me to create, because I'm an overthinker and I over-deliver. I think I like to get a dopamine hit from getting good results, so I have to kind of rein myself in. But I really overthought this. I was like, how can I help people? Because I like to do things differently, and I like to know that it's actually, something that's going to land, something that's going to deliver value. And I wanted to have it at a price point that meant it wasn't out of reach to those people as well. So this is basically, if I could hit send on your emails, that's what I'd be doing for you, because it's everything in there. I map out so you get 4 calls with me. That alone is worth more than the investment. I'm taking on 10 people for the first round just to get it up and running, get people in, tweak it as we kind of go along. That's why I've set the price point lower than what it's worth. So you get 4 calls with me. I then map out your PR strategy. I tell you the publications to pitch. I tell you the sections to pitch to. I tell you the stories to pitch. I also give you a pitching formula. So it's quite literally all there for you. And then I'm there if you want to kind of bounce ideas from me, off me, then that's possible as well. Obviously, it's not done for you. I'm not going out and pitching on your behalf. That's a different package from me. But this is a way to say, right, you want to do PR, don't just go and give your story away. Think about what you're doing, because your story can have life and it can really build momentum, and that can all feed back to you. So do it properly, and I can really help you to do that.
Amazing. And how much is it?
So it's £2,000 plus VAT for the entire year. And I've got a payment plan in place. And 2 people have signed up with a payment plan, because when I say I want it to be for people who can't yet access my one-to-ones, I really mean it. It's not just something I'm kind of saying. So if they think that it's right for them, and more importantly, if I think that it's right for them, then I'm happy to work with people on that basis.
I think that's insane value. I think that's absolutely amazing, Carol.
You?
So how can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so come and join my free group on Facebook. It's called How to Make the Headlines with journalist Carol Driver. There's more than 2,000 people in there now. Haven't monetized that. I'm terrible. I need some help with my business strategy, because I'm just like, yeah, come into my world. I'll give you all this information. There's loads of opportunities to promote your business in there. Come and find my website, caroldriver.com. Come and just find me. Have a chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been so useful, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.